Are you taking the 2021 AP Human Geography exam? If you are, you're in the right place. You're here at Marco Learning with me. My name is John. This is Danny Sanchez from @TheHumanGeoGuy on Instagram and TikTok. Definitely check out his accounts for all the latest breaking news in the human geography world. Danny, we have some human geo AP digital exam news from the
Tell me
college.
more.
So tonight's session is going to be all about agricultural challenges in, you said it's Unit 5, is that right?
Yes, Unit 5.
So we're going to be going over Unit 5. That's going to be the focus of our session. Before we go there, though, I want to show you all something that the College Board recently released. Today is Friday, March 26th. For those of you joining us live, I invite you to chat with us in the chat, like this video, subscribe to our channel. I'll be posting the link to this deck. And we'll be posting more updates on the Marco Learning Instagram and TikTok pages. I know @TheHumanGeoGuy will be doing the same thing on Instagram and TikTok. What I want to show you, Danny, in this deck is some interesting behind the scenes looks at what's going on at this year's exam. Let me start with one of the cool features here. This matters less for Human Geo, but this animated slide that we're looking at shows you that you can annotate and save your own annotations and highlights as you're reading materials. So it'll matter a lot more for our AP Lang and Lit students and our history students. Danny, do you think this will be useful for AP Human Geo students?
Potentially for the one stimulus FRQ or the two stimulus FRQ, there might be the situation where they have like a phrase or a quote or something that goes in support of another piece of information. And if you can highlight that little spot, it might be to your benefit. You know, again, more so for the English Lang and English Lit, but it could come into play for us.
Great. And it's good. It's important if any of you are taking multiple AP exams to keep those differences in mind. Biology is not human geography, is not English language. For example, if you're taking the biology exam, we know, and I'll show you this real quick, there are these fancy mathematical symbols. Look at all these Greek letters that you can enter into your free response answer. Danny, for AP Human Geography, is there any need on a digital AP exam to be using some of these features like bold, underline, superscript, symbols? You can copy and paste. Any value to that?
Probably not, but what I do like is that the visuals that could go with the question look like they're pretty crisp, pretty clear, pretty easy to understand. So that is making me feel better, because I would guess anywhere from about 40 to 50% of the questions are going to have some type of stimulus attached to it.
Yeah, notice what it says over here on the left. It says there's no files to upload and you won't submit any handwritten work. So remember the 2021 digital AP exams, no iPhones, no iPads. You're taking it on this platform. You are not typing in Microsoft Word or Google Docs. In fact, you have to enter into lockdown mode. This is not the lockdown browser, but a lockdown mode that will block you from using any other applications. No Grammarly, no open book, open notes on this year's exams, no access to this information. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. Now, one other thing that's interesting here, we've talked about this before on the Marco Learning Instagram and TikTok pages. It looks like, and this is interesting, Danny, it looks like after you are done selecting a question, like, okay, I'm going to pick C. Look at this. So it looks like biology / human geography, fish geography. I press C, I press next, and then it looks like it's going to take me to this, which is going to add more clicking and a reminder that you cannot go back and forth at all between the multiple choice sections. Questions on this exam. The stimulus will be on the left, the question will be on the right. Now notice this too. I don't know if you saw this, Danny, you can zoom and expand. So you can zoom in and zoom out if you're having problems looking at things. You can also expand the whole diagram or expand the whole free response thing to really make the screen dynamic. Any implications of this, you think, for human geo students?
Well, as far as the idea of not being able to go back on a question, that's why I've been screaming from the mountaintop. If you are in a situation where you can safely get onto a campus and take the paper test, I do believe that's your best option, because like anything else in this world, sometimes you'll answer a question and then a few minutes later, you're like, oh man, I messed up. And you want to go back, or something else, another question, triggers your brain to have a certain chain of thoughts. And if you can't go back, that's the disadvantage you're at. Additionally, I didn't realize it's going to ask you after every question, reminder you can't go back. That's going to eat into the time they actually have to take the test itself. They're going to have to hit enter and next question 60 different times.
Yeah, and that, by the way, is an assumption I'm making. It just seems to me, this is something we'll be able to try, everyone, as of April the 8th on the College Board's website. You'll actually be able to go try out the software, download it. But it seems like after each question this pops up. So you're right. If that is correct, I'm 95% sure on this, then that creates many dozens of new clicks and transactions for you while you're taking the exam. Now, one thing, a couple other quick things I wanted to point out, Danny, before we turn it over to the main event, which is this Unit 5 agricultural challenges. There is a timer here at the top that will, at 5 minutes, like a proctor in the room, tell you, hey, you got 5 minutes, and then you can hide that timer. Notice here, this is the AP US History exam. This is interesting. We weren't sure about this, but they're going to give you the entire document-based and SAQ section at once. They're going to make you manage your own time. Look at this line over here. It says, please note that you are responsible for pacing yourself. And so there's more information here. I'm going to share it with everyone. Danny, how important is it on the AP Human Geography free response section, whether it's paper and pencil or digital, to pace yourself, to manage your time well?
Well, my thought process there is it depends. If they're going to do it similar to the AP US, where, we have 3 FRQs we have to write in 75 minutes, if they're going to force you on a hard timer, 25 minutes per, I'm not wild about that. I do like the idea if you have the whole time allotment given to you, because I always preach, if you feel really strong on one FRQ and are shaky on the other, by all means, use the extra time on the one well, scavenge every point you can there, 7 possible points. If you get 5 to 6 points on one of the FRQs, like, congratulations, you just passed the exam. You just set yourself up to be successful. And if you're only going to get 1 or 2 points from the hard one anyway, in that case, you can do that in 10 minutes. So I'm a big believer in being able to distribute your time to what you're most comfortable with. I'm hoping that they're going to give you 3 FRQs and a full 75-minute allotment so you could stick to that plan.
Yes, Danny, that's great advice. And I think some of these general strategies we just gone over about the 2021 AP exams, we're going to lead to the side. I'll be putting those links for you in the description. And Danny, I'm going to turn it over to you for our analysis here of agricultural challenges in Unit 5. And I'll be in the chat. If you're watching this video and you like it, press that like button. Talk to us. We're happy to answer any of the questions you guys have. Thanks for coming.
All right. Thanks a lot, John. Taking over, let me share my screen with you. All right, give me 1 second. It's always for the teacher, that moment of, wait a second, I got to transition to my PowerPoint. All right. So looking at the screen here, our agenda, we did the welcome, we did an additional little bonus with the extra information about the digital exam hacks, big ideas 1, 2, and 3. It's going to be subsistence versus commercial farming. That's a significant theme and something that you should be familiar with. So that's kind of our starting point for everything here. It's just going to be a conversation of a few minutes where we distinguish between subsistence, survival farming, commercial farming for a profit. Big idea too is going to be problems for subsistence agriculture. I'm not going to go over all the problems for subsistence agriculture because that will take too long, but I've picked about 5 or 6 things that I feel I can really focus on for a few minutes to give you a general introduction to agricultural challenges for subsistence. And the last one, commercial agricultural challenges, things we deal with primarily in the developed rich world in terms of what we deal with on here for farming challenges. All right. First, though, exam hacks as promised. First off, multiple choice hack, kind of a strategy thing more than anything else, but how to approach each multiple choice question, how you should look at each one. The first thing I want to drop on you is the idea that you need to read the question. And that might seem like, well, of course I'm going to read the question. A trap that I see a lot of students fall into is the idea that they kind of start reading the question, see the magic word, especially for the smart kids. They process stuff so fast. They've come to a conclusion about what the rest of this question should be. They run to the options, pick the buzzword that they know matches, and then they move on. That's not a good strategy. You need to make sure that, there's a famous quote from an old basketball coach, John Wooden, who won God knows how many titles at UCLA: be quick, but don't hurry. So be efficient with your time, but don't hurry and fall into a panic and you're answering questions before you finish reading them, right? So make sure you read the question, all right? After you read the question, look at each option available to you. Read each one. And I want to emphasize here that read each one, because you might find a good answer in A or B and not realize that option C, D, or E have a better answer, because the magic wording for multiple choice question is choose the best answer. And there's going to be several questions on May 4th or May 28th or June 8th, whatever date you're taking the exam, where you're looking at two options. You're like, both of these are right. It's got to be one of these. But you have to ask yourself, which is the better one? So always read each option. Don't just see a right answer and assume it's the best answer. Go through the rest of the options, A through E. And then this is a little something I add, because sometimes kids on a time test feel pressure to be done in a certain amount of time. And then what really ends up happening is you have 60 minutes for this test, and then you realize you finish it in about 52 minutes. Read the question again. And I need you to read the question again to make sure you didn't make a mistake, that you didn't go through it too quickly, that you didn't make an assumption about the question. Read the question again and then proceed from there. So that's my mandatory. Read the question, read each option, read the question again. At that point, you switch to the next part of our strategy, where you're going to ask yourself, what is this question really asking? And what I mean by that is sometimes you get so thrown off by like the way things are worded that you can't see the old saying, you can't see the forest from the trees. You might get a question, something along the lines of identify, which of the following is a push factor. And what I want you to think about, if you're comparing push factors and pull factors are things that draw people in. Pull factors are things that push people away in terms of migration. Well, what is a question like that really asking you? And what that question is really asking you is, which of these things is bad? A factory opens, you get an educational opportunity somewhere, a earthquake destroys the city. Which of these is a push factor? Literally all it's asking you is, which of these things is bad? All right. Also, can you read a chart? Sometimes you'll look at these charts and they'll associate it to a specific concept or vocabulary term. And then you read your way through the question, and all it's basically asking you is not even, do you have any prior knowledge? It's, can you look at a chart and come to a conclusion about where, something has increased more? And if you're looking at a chart where there's like gains of a certain type, and one features line looks like this, and the other features line looks like this, it's basically asking you to identify which one is more, the angle like this or the angle like this. And that's all it's really asking you. Can you read a chart, and can you come to a logical conclusion from just reading the chart? All right. Continuing from there, FRQ hacks. Pay attention to the verbs being used. I can't emphasize this enough. All right. You have to be able to identify. Identify means pointing out an example of something, or finding an example of something, or providing an example of something. Can you look at a car and realize that's a car? All right. Something as simple as that. All right. Define, they're going to ask you for a definition. So much of this course is predicated on vocabulary. Do you know your vocabulary? Do you know your terms? Are you able to, if you do know your term, can you find an example of that term? Can you define these things? All right. There's about like 500-ish vocab terms that are applicable to this course. And that's why I am crazy and neurotic about vocabulary with my students, because if you just knew vocabulary, you'd at least like get some points on the exam. I'm not saying that you'd pass the exam, but you wouldn't be completely lost basically if you knew nothing but vocabulary. All right. Next, these two I'm going to put together: describe and explain. Describe is, can you give me a detail to prove that you know what this is? All right. Can you give me a few sentences that say, okay, this person clearly understands what this concept is. This person clearly understands, what's going on in this piece of data, in this picture, or in a certain real world geographic situation. Explain takes that a step further. It's like describe plus information. All right. So you're looking at, can I tell you about this feature and then go next level? So you're adding information. And the way that I heard this explained, and I don't remember the teacher's name, but he's a teacher out of Fort Lauderdale, St. Thomas Aquinas. I just shout out to him if you go to St. Thomas Aquinas. I've had a few kids in these sessions before. That guy's a phenomenal teacher. I feel so bad I can't remember his name right now. But the way he explained it was basically think of a little kid constantly asking you the question, why? All right. You give a basic explanation, and then you go, because blah, 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 because blah, blah, blah. All right. So like an example could be like, I referenced cars earlier for identify, explain the role of cars in suburbanization. All right. Well, once cars became affordable, people in the middle class were able to buy them. They were seeking out better, a more comfortable lifestyle away from the urban center and in the suburbs. The car gave them the means by which to get to and from the city for work. And you expand the thought, and you keep going with because. All right. And then the last one is compare. And that's going to be being able to look at two things and how are they different. And the next thing we're going to go to is distinguishing the differences between farming that is subsistence farming, which is primarily in the poor world, and commercial farming, which is primarily in the rich world. Can you compare these two things? And here's a little hack for you. All right. When you have to compare two things, make sure you're referencing both things. I've seen it when you have to compare two concepts and the kid does a heck of a job explaining very well one of the two things, but does not take the time to show the contrast in both things. So please make sure that you are referencing both things. If they ask you to compare farming in the poor world and farming in the rich world, make sure you're referencing farming in the poor world and how that same feature is going to be different in the rich world. And speaking of, let's go to big idea one, subsistence versus commercial agriculture. The definition for subsistence agriculture, farming, or the crops are consumed by the farm and their family as a means of survival. The way I program my students to think about this, I legitimately just call it survival farming. These people are farming to survive. They are growing food. They are eating food. All right. It's going to be what is predominant in the developing world, in the poor world, in a less developed countries, all the different names we have for that. All right. And what you see in this picture on the right is subsistence farming, people farming in the developing world. In contrast, commercial agriculture is going to be farming where the crops are grown to be sold away from the farm. You see much more of this in the developed world. I do want to add, commercial agriculture happens in the developing world, in the poor world. That being said, what you see more prevalent is subsistence agriculture. The commercial agriculture is really connected to what we see happening in the rich world. All right. Farmers are growing large amounts of food and they are selling it as part of agribusiness to a bigger, it goes up the chain basically. All right. Leading to our next slide. How can you tell the differences between subsistence and commercial farming? The first thing, what is the purpose of the farming? Is it for survival or is it for profit? If you're growing yams in your backyard and that's your main source of food, that's going to be subsistence farming, survival farming. If you have if you have huge farms and using machinery, like in that picture, that's another one thing, one of the things we point out in a second. If you're making money, if you're selling your crops, what you're looking at here is that you are a commercial farmer. You are profiting from your sales. All right. The way I always teach this to my students, in America, where does a farmer get his food? And the answer is the grocery store, like everybody else. It is profit farming. All right. Next, the shift, the percentage of farmers in more developed countries, in the rich world, globally, it's about 3%. In the United States, it's even lower than that. It's about 1%. And the idea is you have a very small number of people that feed everybody. Additionally, in the poor world, the developing world, you're looking at over 40% of the people are involved in agricultural activity as their main job, as how they provide for themselves. And one of the sad ironies you find in the developing world is you'll have a society where half the people are farmers, and yet there is famine and devastating food insecurity because they just can't generate enough food for themselves. All right. The next way you distinguish between the two is going to be machinery. In the rich world, in more developed countries, they rely on machinery. That piece of equipment you see in that picture there might be a $700,000 piece of equipment. There's huge investments made in being able to farm on a very large scale. All right. Continuing from there, you're looking at transportation improvements. All right. You're looking at transportation improvements. So you're able to have, trucks rolling in and out, cargo coming in. You have, sorry, I just got caught for a second. You have trucks rolling in and out, being able to move food from the farmers to the processors, from the processors to packaging, and eventually ends up at your local supermarket. And I'm going to do it to you, John. Like in Florida, it might end up at your local Publix. In case you were wondering, yes, Publix chicken tender subs are on sale this week. Deliciousness come to you. All right. And additionally, you might have scientific researchers that, are committing money to finding ways to farm much more efficiently and on a better scale. All right. LDCs rely on human and animal labor. This is going to be people working with their bare hands. This is going to be, oxen pulling a plow through a flooded field. They just don't have the capital. They don't have the money to be able to invest into having machinery like you see in this picture. All right. A question I got from the chat. Do they tell you the exact topics that are on the FRQ? No, they do not. Everything is fair game. All right. I have seen this happen where literally you have students walk out of the exam. They're like, man, there was a topic that wasn't on the exam. And after the days pass, when you can speak about that wasn't in the book or something like that, and they will after the 2 or 3 days by which you can begin to discuss the exam, when they release the FRQs, you'll realize, oh my, they asked an FRQ based off of what is the equivalent of one paragraph in the textbook. So the way I'll treat this, what can be on the FRQ? The answer is literally anything and everything. That's why I try to never guess what's going to be on the exam. Their veneer, even this assumption, the idea that, oh, well, because this was on the exam last year, won't be on the exam next year. And you've seen related topics as FRQs consecutive years in a row. So if you try to guess what's going to be an FRQ prompt, that's probably not going to be the best course of action. Just be prepared for anything and everything. All right. A couple of more differences between farming in the developing world, the developed world, subsistence versus commercial agriculture is going to be farm size. All right. In the US, the average farm size is going to be about 400 acres. All right. it's going to be a really big farm. A friend of mine grew up on a farm in Iowa, and I asked him, how big was your farm? And he said, well, it was a small farm. It was only about 180 acres. Meanwhile, I grew up in a little two-bedroom, two-bedroom, one-bathroom apartment in New Jersey where we all lived packed in like sardines. And I was mind blown that he said 180 acres was a little farm. All right. So the average farm in the US is over 400 acres. And something to keep in mind is we are actually consolidating farms. We have fewer farms, but are increasing farmland. A lot of farms are being consolidated. Like a lot of the old school traditional family farms have been bought out by, mega farming conglomerates that are just buying up more and more land because there is money to be made in farming. All right. It's a profitable venture. All right. On the flip side, in China, the average is under 3 acres. And people are subsistence farmers, which means you're trying to find a little patch of dirt in which you can generate enough food to keep yourself and your family going. So farm size is going to be a big visual differentiation. All right. The last one, relationship to other businesses. I hinted on this earlier. In the rich world, more developed countries, you have agribusiness, the network of businesses that are part of a larger economy. These are going to be the people who sell seeds to farmers, who sell, chemical fertilizers and pesticides, the companies that arrange transportation, the food processors. There's big business relating to food in the developed world. In contrast, in less developed countries, in the poor world, you grow it locally, you eat it locally. Like your idea of like business as it relates to food is, well, I'm a farmer and I grew carrots, and you're a farmer and you grew potatoes, and you might be exchanging some of those in the village as a barter system. So again, these are going to be the main ways that you distinguish between the farming that happens in the developing world as compared to the developed world, right? If there's any questions, if I could have John jump back into the chat for a second, see if there's any questions that came from the chat.
Yeah, Danny. First of all, I just want to repeat to everyone who's here, thank you for joining. Let us know what questions. There was a question from Aditya. I'm not sure if I'm saying your name right. Does the percentage refer to the country population?
Yes, like what percentage of the overall population, what percentage of people are engaged in farming activities? In the developed world, that's going to be a very low number. A very small number of people feed everybody. In contrast, in the developing world, it seems like everybody, and their mother. And I'm going to emphasize mother because in the developing world, there's such a greater percentage of women who are involved in agricultural work as well, that it's a huge percentage of the overall population.
Yeah, and one other thing I want to share real quick, I'm going to take over your screen sharing, is let's talk about the @thehumanGeoGuy account that you have on Instagram, and more importantly, the fresh new @thehumanGeoGuy account on TikTok. Definitely follow these accounts. It's just the Human Geo Guy for both of these accounts. A great way to stay up with news, updates, 60-second reviews. What are some of the word of the day reviews that you've been doing on TikTok?
I've been trying to focus like on economic development, industrialization. Actually, I'm going to post right after this the next word of the day. I've done maquiladora, so those are like the factories in Mexico just over the border. I've done deindustrialization. I've done brownfields. So I've been sticking to that as my theme. But I just want to add something talking about industrialization and its role. Have you paid any attention to what's going on in the Suez Canal? Have you seen what happened there?
Can't stop looking at that story. It is one of those things. You know what it reminds me of, Danny, is that moment when that oil leak happened in the Gulf, and here we are in the 21st century. We have all the technology in the world, and then we're faced with a problem. We do not have our immediate solution, and it drives us nuts. And this is, as I understand it, right, a mega ship gets stuck diagonally at the base of the Suez Canal. And now we're losing billions of dollars a day. Hundreds of ships are being held up, and it's maybe weeks until it's fixed. Is that right?
what I've seen is that they basically have forced it to the side, and that they're able to have ships flow through, but it's a trickle as compared to being a steady flow like it normally is, because it's dangerous. I mean, that thing is gigantic. It's a quarter of a mile long. The description that I saw for it is, imagine the Empire State Building laying on its side is what that ship is. That's what that ship is.
That's some AP human geography right there. And thinking about this, that we still rely on three major passes in the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal, and through Indonesia to get goods around pirates, around choppy waters and low waters this is massive amounts of goods. So the implications are incredible. What has caught your eye for AP Human Geo students about that story?
A couple of things have caught my eye. So the first one is the statement that came from Evergreen, the company that owns this ship. Like, yeah, this is probably costing us $34 billion. Like, you talk about a press release you don't want to make. This is going to cost us $34 billion. That I saw that. I had to read it again to wrap my mind around like what that actually means. Additionally, the memes have been amazing on this. I saw one that shows like the ship blocking the Suez Canal. It's like AP exam. And then the next ship trying to get through is like the content I still have to cover before the exam. The other meme I saw was, and this also human geo, satellite, remote sensing, the idea of taking a picture from space. It's like when you messed up so bad at work, they can see it from Google Maps.
I know, I did see those. That's the fun thing is whenever there's a global catastrophe, we will find the memes to get us through the difficult times. And
it's how we deal with the challenges of life.
Absolutely. And one question we just got in the chat real quick, I want to go over the exam format. I'm going to show everyone this. I'll put this in the chat for everyone. In fact, I'll do this right now. This is from the College Board's website, so a reliable source of information, at least most of the time. And this information here shows you the 3 dates. So the paper in-school exam in 2021 will be on Tuesday, May 4th at 12 p.m. local time. No matter what your high school is, you guys will do it local. There's going to be 2 digital exams you can take either in school or at home. They will start at the exact same time worldwide on Friday, May 28th at 12 p.m. Tuesday, June 8th at 12 p.m. And then, Danny, maybe you could walk us through this. I have a question for you actually about this part that is right here. Every AP exam is a little bit different. Almost every AP exam has multiple choice and free response, and most of them treat them half and half. The question I have for you, Danny, is this. As we look at 60 questions in 60 minutes, do students tend to run out of time on the multiple choice section? Do they tend to run out of time on the free response? Neither, both? What does it look like with timing and pacing?
The pacing that I see is that it's typically most kids will finish. And what I always ask this question, like I will survey the room. Did you finish right before it, like time ran out? Like, did you bubble number 60 and then time, like, just got in there? Did you not finish? I always have a handful of students. I typically have, this year I have about 100 students taking it. I have anywhere typically from about 100 to 130 students that take the exam every year. I only have a handful of students that don't finish the exam. Part of that is like when I am, giving my students their own test all year long, however many questions the test is, that's how many minutes you have so that they get used to the pacing throughout the year. So that helps. Additionally, the consensus I get is that most kids will finish with anywhere from like 3 to 5 minutes to spare on that portion.
Yeah, and just briefly, I just want to point out, that's a crucial strategy to figure out. If most people are fine, then you'll probably be fine. One-time section should be plenty of time for you to figure that out. What about the allocation? That's multiple choice. Does that apply for free response, did you say, as well?
The way that it's one block of time, 75 minutes for the 3 FRQs. That averages at 25 minutes each, but ultimately, at least on the paper exam, they give you like the booklet, you unseal it. I always tell the students, find prompt 1, find prompt 2, find prompt 3, decide which one you're going to tackle first, because you don't have to divide the time evenly. And as far as the consensus I get from there, most of the students, again, handful might say, like, I was, wrapping up the last one, but I didn't get to finish it exactly. Most of my students finish all 3. And actually, a lot of them will finish with even time to spare, because here's the thing. At some point, you're gonna be out of things to say. And if you're out of things to say, at that point, you're not gonna write just for the sake of writing. I always expand your answer where you can, but you're not gonna write for the sake of writing. Or as I tell my students, avoid just verbal diarrhea, where you're just talking to talk, which I feel like I'm doing right now.
No, I'm going to take off a point. No, they never take points off on this exam, but you're not getting more points by just spinning words past. The graders are not stupid people. They're AP Human Geography teachers. They're college professors. They are following guidelines and rubrics, and they want to give you points. Don't try to get one past them. It's not going to work.
I wanted to, if you could go back, slide back to where you saw that information. Just one thing I forgot to say, I caught a mistake that I made earlier. If you look at where it says for the multiple choice question, it says approximately 30 to 40%. And earlier I said 40 to 50%. I used the high number as the low number. But again, 30 to 40% is the more accurate number. But the main point of that, sometimes they're just asking you, can you read a chart? Can you figure out which of these 2 lines has shown greater gains over time?
Absolutely. That's really great. A little adjustment there, and a good reminder, just like ACT Science, just like a lot of other standardized tests that look like they have some sciencey components, it's actually very doable. Now, one thing, we got a question in the chat from Jacob that I want to address, which was a really good one. I'm here again on the College Board's website. This is an important chart as well to keep in mind. So Jacob's question was for the multiple choice questions, is each unit have a set amount of questions guaranteed on the exam, or is it possible that some units will have a lot more than others? And I guess for the multiple choice section, it's just pretty clear that unit 1 is a unit that sets up the course and counts a little bit or significantly less than the other units 2 through 7, all of which are equal in weight. Is that an accurate way of reading this chart?
Yeah, the what I've seen in the past, that chart has been like that, where it's like within the window. But when you do the math, 12 to 17% of a 60 question test, that's not much wiggle room. That's basically like, you're averaging, the average would be like 6 questions from unit 1 and 9 from the rest. And, the wiggle room there might be, you might have 8 on agriculture and 6 on development. But you're not, there's not going to be a huge deviation. You're not going to see a situation where, like, there were no questions on urbanization. They are mandated to have, at least, 7 to 8 questions. And on the high end, like 10 to 11 questions from each unit.
Great. And what I'm going to do, Danny, I'll just put this in the chat for everyone, the link. There's another question I'm going to answer before I hand it back over to you, which is a question about how do they convert the multiple choice and FRQ into the 5-point score? So this is not the most scientific way to do this, but this is pretty good. This is on the Albert.io website. And basically what they do is they let you just sort of figure out, hey, let's say you get 40 out of 60, that's 2/3, 67% correct. Let's say you have 41. Okay, on the first free response, you're going to get 5 out of 7. The second one, you get 4 out of 7. And the third one, you get 4 out of 7. This is not perfection, right? This isn't 60 out of 60 or 59 out of 60. It's not 7 out of 7 all the way through. And this person gets a perfect score. And yeah, go ahead.
Just the way they use their sliding scales typically are pretty forgiving. Like, I think we talked about it all the way back in unit 1 at the very first, of these sessions. You can get away with not being perfect on this, which I always, out of 7 possible points, the average score is going to be somewhere around 3 points something on each FRQ. If you can get 3 points on each FRQ and just be in the ballpark of half the multiple choice questions, congratulations, you just passed the exam. You don't have to be perfect. So many students over the years, like, well, I have an 88 in the class, I'm a failure at life. It's like, you're getting 88% of AP questions right. Congratulations, you're going to be fine on exam day.
Yeah, this is an interesting, and what I'll do is I'll just put this little link in the chat. This is an interesting little, again, not perfectly scientific calculator put out by the nice people at Albert.io. Here is their description, like, hey, in highlighted yellow, like this is not necessarily this year's exam, but a very useful way to sort of see the implications. Just like you said, 20 something correct here. Look at that. I mean, that is really not the best performance you're ever going to see. And mathematically, so you fail the multiple choice, you fail basically the entire exam and you get a 3. So that's it. That's a reminder for everyone that when you're taking this exam, if your goal is a 5, your goal is a C by high school standards. If you're going for a 3, your goal is a nice D minus. It's a hard fought D minus. It's a hard win to do well in the AP exam because you're taking a college level course in high school. So some great thank yous from the people in the chat. Danny, I'm going to turn it back over to you. We can do another exam hack before we wrap up. And real quick, just to answer this question that Jacob just popped in, do you know how the curve works for the human geo exam? And if the digital and in-person exams will be graded on the same curve. So remember, officially the exams are not curved, they're normed. But Danny, what are the differences? Are there any substantive differences between the human geo digital exam and the human geo paper and pencil?
It's the same exam. My understanding, there's 60 multiple choice questions in 60 minutes, and there's 3 FRQs in 75 minutes. Again, I'm still questioning, are they going to do a hard 25 per or 1 block for the whole thing? But it's the same test. There's no deviation. Now, are they going to have to account for the fact that the digital scoring might be different from the paper scoring? I hope so, for the sake of the kids taking the digital exam, because I stand by the fact that that's going to be a harder test because, I'm a big believer that on the paper test, you're going to have, 5 to 6 questions that are just basic vocab. You're going to have a couple of things you can just identify, from a visual. I don't think they're going to have something on the digital exam that you can Google search or ask Siri because, look, like I'm not advocating cheating at all. If anything, on the contrary, they're going to try to give you cheat-proof questions that are much more analytical. So you can't just, ask Siri, hey, explain to me what, break of bulk points mean in like the global scale of cargo, shipping. Like, you're not going to be able to do that. You're going to have to think your way through these, which is also why I'm pushing people towards the paper exam. So for the sake of the kids hoping that are doing the digital exam, I hope their scoring is different, because if I had to bet money, my money's going to be on those scores are going to be generally lower as a whole.
Yeah, so I think it's important for everyone watching this too. Again, follow Danny's advice. Cheating's not worth it. They're going to try to make it cheat-proof, and you spin your wheels. You're not going to get that many great results, and you're really risking a lot. And then to that end, don't worry too much about the inside baseball of the scores. We're hoping it's all going to work out. I think you got to focus on if you're here live with us right now, it's March 26th. You've got plenty of time to study. So Danny, let's do that. I'll let you share your screen. Let's take a look at one more exam hack. And guys, keep posting these amazing questions. If you're enjoying this video, press that like button. Yeah.
I just want to say one more thing about scoring before we go, and I'll go through the rest of the slides quick just for the sake of time. But last year when, it was the educational apocalypse and we're like trying to figure out what to do, and they still were able to have AP exams. People were freaking out about exams. And one of the things I said is, look, my name is Danny Sanchez and I speak only for myself. I do not speak for Marco Learning or for the College Board. I approve this message, but nobody else. I don't think in a global pandemic, they were going to create like cut scores where, well, the pass rate this year was 37%, 15% lower than normal. I'm going to venture a guess that they're going to be in a similar mindset where the pass rates on almost every exam across the board were higher than normal last year. I don't know if they're going to be as high as they were last year, but my suspicion would be that they're going to be, very reasonable pass rates relative to, what is normal.
That's great to know. Yeah, I think that's really good. And again, it helps us all kind of keep our focus on the best way to use the time what we've got and study and get this right. So go ahead, I'll let you share, and
All right.
I'll be in the chat with everyone.
All right. And I'm going to try to go a little bit quicker than I normally would, just because we had a great chat right there. Thank you so much for the awesome questions. Really appreciate it. I was going to have a question break in between. I'm going to fly through these slides so we can have more questions on the back end if possible. All right. So continuing on. Just for a couple of types of farming, I wanted to point out a couple of issues that might come into play. For pastoral nomadism, which I hope you already know what it is, but basically it's agriculture based on the herding of animals, tends to happen in very dry climates. You know, it's declining. There's not as many pastoral nomads as there used to be. Part of the reason they're being forced to practice what we would consider traditional, sedentary agriculture, where they stay in one place and grow crops. And also they're losing part of their grazing land due to irrigation or mining. All right. So basically, the areas they used to be able to graze through pretty freely, now there might be land claims there, or a company doing a big dig looking for natural resources. So they're being forced more onto their plots of land than staying there. All right. So those are going to be problems for pastoral nomads. All right. On the next slide, shifting cultivation, often referred to as slash and burn agriculture. This tends to happen in very humid tropical areas, happens in Latin America, specifically like Brazil into the Amazon, happens in parts of Central Africa, pushes out towards Indonesia. And one of the criticisms of shifting cultivation is that it doesn't yield enough food because they're using rotating fields. They're not using all of the land available to them. And if you're dealing with a growing population and you have a system of farming that basically leaves about 80% of your available land fallow at any period, the idea that they are not maximizing the potential of their land. Also, I referenced Brazil, huge issues in Brazil, deforestation and hopefully reforestation. But what's going on in Central and South America is that there's lots of logging. They are chopping down trees to sell for lumber. They're chopping down trees in order to be able to have bigger areas for cattle grazing. And last I checked, the rainforests are pretty important because they produce this little thing we like called oxygen. So again, it's critical that we don't destroy the tropical rainforests. And just a little nugget here, some Latin American countries have pledged to not cut down trees in order to cancel debts. There's a vocab term for this called debt for nature swaps. An example of this in the 80s was Bolivia. They owed they owed a few $100 million they just couldn't pay back. And basically, they agreed to, guarantee that they would never chop down a certain, stretch of rainforest. So again, logging, deforestation, huge issue in areas that practice shifting cultivation. All right. In general, undernourishment in most of the world, thankfully, the percentage of people facing hunger is decreasing. We're getting better about food access. There is one exception to this where, food insecurity has sadly increased, is in sub-Saharan Africa. We're going to talk about a couple of the issues on another slide that have led to that. And here's the even sadder sentence that comes with the idea that people are not taking in enough food. There's enough food in the world to make every person on earth obese. It's not a food quantity issue. It's a distribution and access issue. How do we get food into the hands of the people that need it most? And even more importantly, not the idea of not just, hey, here's food, the idea of allowing them to be able to find a way to sustain themselves in a way that preserves their environment and is sustainable, and they continue that farming over time. Because one of the big problems that they face, in certain parts of the developing world, I believe it's my next slide, it's desertification. Guys, every day the Saharan desert's getting a little bit bigger. All right. You see, there's North Africa. You see where the green starts. Every day that desert's pushing a little bit further, further south. All right. Desert growth caused by unsustainable farming and overgrazing in semi-arid areas. The idea that, particularly along this region called the Sahel, they're basically all stage 2 countries. I know I referenced in the previous YouTube live that a country like Niger has, you know, a total fertility rate of 7. The average woman is having 7 children. And when you're trying to feed that big of a population, you might, you know, do farming practices that, you know, are not very soil sensitive. And you end up in a situation where, you know, your options are preserve the soil, but people starve, or try to generate some food, but you might have long-term farming issues if you're unable to grow in that region in the future years. So the Sahel is that most vulnerable region, that southern edge of the Saharan desert. Also, and this might sound crazy too, even too much water on the flip side, that can cause over salinization of the soil. Grazing is a big issue here too, because the animals need to roam free. They eat the grass. And, you know, we think of grass, you know, in our suburban landscapes in America, as that's that pretty thing in front of your house. Grassland, with the purpose it truly serves in nature, is to retain moisture in the soil. So desertification is a huge problem in the developing world, all right? Also, even the green revolution, which has made it possible to feed a global population of 7.5 billion people, particularly in Asia, you know, the advancements of science and Dr. Borlaug and, you know, all this advanced science to be able to figure out how to feed billions of people in Asia and Latin America, and problems with the green revolution has made much of the world single crop dependent, monoculture. You're in Southeast Asia, you're basically looking at just rice fields everywhere. You get into Northeast China, what used to be Manchuria, you're looking at predominantly just wheat farming. You go to India, the interior plain of India, it's going to be all wheat farms. So the idea that monoculture presents situations where there's not going to be much opportunity for economic development. It basically just becomes on a gigantic scale, we're farming to survive, all right? Additionally, has introduced chemicals into the environment, you know, these chemical fertilizers, these chemical pesticides, you know, as they bleed into the environment, there are repercussions of that. Also financially creates, again, this dependency, makes the poor world dependent on seeds from rich world corporations. So that relationship, almost like neo-colonialism, where the poor world has to depend on the rich world in order to sustain itself. And also, again, I always say things come back to gender issues, has shifted power away from women. As the farming has become more productive in these parts of the world, the wealth is being held in the hands of the men who usually have the property rights. In contrast, as we referenced earlier, the proportion of women who are working in the fields and farmers is much greater in the poor world. So again, it even has contributed to like the gender divide. All right. The global food trade is another one that I hit hard with my students in my class. The poor world may sacrifice growing necessities for itself to provide luxury goods to the rich world. And they're providing, here's a simple one, coffee. There are poor countries in the world where they have food insecurity, people are starving, and yet they're growing coffee that they'll sell at Starbucks for $5 a cup. All right. And again, they're unable to provide for their own people, and yet they're using prime agricultural land to sell a premium product. And again, it's one of those things. Do you try to build up your economy long-term by generating revenue by growing coffee for the rich world? Or do you feed people immediately? Like, I understand wanting to build up your economy long-term and build up infrastructure and invest in yourself. At the same time, people are starving, and that's very problematic. All right. I'm going to shift now to some issues with commercial agriculture. Mediterranean agriculture is primarily the growing of luxury crops. In California, you have, you know, a lot of issues. You know, urban development in California stripped quality land and also strained the water supply. When people think of California, they think of the Pacific coast and the beaches and people surfing and Hollywood, and in Northern California, the tech industry. Well, one of the things you get with California, people don't realize, California has our biggest population. It also produces more food than anybody else. And they have been dealing with drought conditions there for decades. They've had sustained drought. and you have lake beds drying out, their water sources are just drying up, and people think it's because, oh, they're watering their lawns. No, it's because they're producing a lot of food in that interior valley, and you're in a dry climate, but you're producing a ton of food. You're using your limited water resources for that. All right. Also, just something to think about, again, exam hack. If anything comes up about like environmental issues, like with Mediterranean agriculture or something related to California, the answer is probably going to be something related to their lack of water out there. All right, continuing for dairy farming, problems with dairy farming, declining revenues and increasing cost. A cost that kills farmers is when the price of gasoline goes up. Because the thing with dairy farming, it has to happen close to the market. So you're constantly moving product. It can't sit like on a shelf for too long. So you're dealing with what you're dealing with is as the price of gas goes up, it's like automatic. The price of gas is up, the price of a gallon of milk goes up, almost like to the penny. To the penny is usually the relationship there. It's labor intensive. It's something that you have to keep at constantly because those cows don't stop producing milk because the farmer went on vacation. Lastly, proximity markets, because it has to be close to the market, their land costs are higher. So all their costs are going up, and they can't jack up their prices too much because at the end of the day, there's a threshold to what we're willing to pay for a gallon of milk. All right. Rapid urbanization, as cities and suburbs grow outward, areas that used to be prime agricultural land are being lost to housing. All right. And you end up in a situation where, where I used to live in Miami, the western areas, there used to be a bunch of farms out there. And for these farmers, as the city of Miami grew and the population grew and the suburbs expanded outward, and you get that urban sprawl, those farmers got offered millions of dollars for their land, and they realize it'll take me the next 20 years of farming to make a couple $1,000,000. In contrast, I can make that right now and walk out the door. So as cities grow outward, you are losing prime agricultural land. Another response has been to try to eat local and try to create a situation where you're not transporting goods as far. Urban farming has been part of this as well. Small rooftop farms or restaurants that only use locally sourced ingredients. All right. Last slide for this session today. Organic farming. A problem with organic farming. Look, Whole Foods, it's great, it's tasty, it's healthy, it's delicious, it's all natural. It's also very expensive, and it doesn't produce enough food. And the way I always emphasize this to my students, if all farming on earth, somebody snapped their fingers and turned it to organic farming, you'd probably have a couple of billion people die because you would not be able to feed the global population. All right, so those are our commercial agriculture challenges. I'll invite John to come back in. Why does California farm and not just import everything? Because when you're trying to feed about 35 million people, it helps to not have to bring in everything from out of town, and so that you have a good amount of food growing locally.
Yeah, and in fact, let me do this real quick. I'll say one of the things that surprised me about this Suez Canal crisis that's happening here in March that we seem to have a partial solution to is this reality of when you have to import so much and you depend on that one waterway, that one distribution channel. We had this during the pandemic. We had so many, the world, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, Danny, but the pre-pandemic world was so much defined by the velocity of everything moving around. Money flying around in digital transactions, humans flying around on planes, everything moving 1,000,000 miles a minute all the time. And then you slam on the brakes and the traffic jam just ripples out in all these directions. And if you don't have your own food base, your own manufacturing, your own whatever, you are very much dependent on all those routes, those planes and trains and automobiles working. You can't have a bad weather. You can't have the Dallas or the Texas freeze that we had a month ago. You can't have, I'll tell you, I'm one of the reasons I'm so interested in this subject, Danny, human geography, is I'm a medieval historian by training. And in the Middle Ages, we have many examples of, for example, the Great Famine from 1315 to 1322 was a slamming on the brakes. There was the waterways froze and boats couldn't move. You had animal murrains, and you had diseases spreading among animals. You had blights on crops. The animals are sick, the crops are sick, the waterways are frozen, and it causes a famine. And that's one of those things about building a sustainable future involves having all those systems integrated. So I've learned a lot here about some of these agricultural challenges. Danny, any other thoughts for us? And I want to encourage everyone in the chat, if you've got other questions, post them there for us before we wrap up tonight.
Just final thought, and this is something, I think I've said this at the end of each session. You know, we call this exam hacks. The biggest hack there is being prepared. You're gonna have to review content, wrap up new content, and balance doing all of that for the next 5.5 weeks as we approach the May 4th exam that all of my students are taking, that I know a lot of the students are taking. I've been talking to a lot of the kids that I like tutor privately, and one thing that's come up, it's like they've been digital all year, but they're coming in just for the exam for that.
Wow.
All right. Let me see the question. I missed it in the chat.
This is Jeff's question from the chat.
When we use examples to support our answers, how recent or how old can the examples be? The only thing I will tell you as it relates to that, if the example works, it doesn't matter when it's from, so long as it's as long as it's applicable. To make sure that you're not giving something that's like outdated. Like an example, a few years ago, like there was a question on devolution, and people were referencing Yugoslavia because in the older textbooks, that's how you referenced it, and they were trying to be more specific to like political devolution, like, you know, the shifting of the capital in Nigeria and the Catalonian independence movement, and they were trying to be more specific to that element. So basically try to get a good grasp of what you're asking to realize whether or not it's an outdated example.
That's
John,
great.
you're still muted. Okay.
Yeah. One thing, that's great advice. And Aditya's asking, what does the FRQ grading rubric look like? And maybe that I could take a quick look at the college. Should I pull up the College Board's website on this?
Yes. I mean, they have samples of past ones there. They're a little bit outdated, not in the style of the questions. The style of the questions are going to be the same, but like in past years, they were like, you know, section B will give 3 examples, and like it's B1, B2, B3. Now each of those examples would be separated as A, B, and C, as opposed to being that. But again, here you see from the 2019 exam, and what you see, I can't see, let me move the chat box. All right, so like, this is not going to be how you'll see it, because right now it says, like, describe what kind of information geography used to map food deserts. And then it says B, identify and explain 2 reasons that food deserts exist in urban areas. And one of the things that that they will do this year, they will split that into, like, right there, that's 4 possible points. They will split that into B, C, D, and E. And then if you look at one of the rubrics, you'll see that you usually have, okay, an identify point is this, an explain point is that. And a lot of it, what I said earlier, depends on the verbiage. Identify is pretty loose. If you can identify an example of it, you don't have to do a deep dive. If it's explain, you better write like at least a fully developed paragraph to have the person understand that you can do the analysis and take it that step further.
And that, by the way, answers Jeff's question about how specific you should be. You've got to develop a few sentences. You can't get away with just a couple of bullet points and random things. It's not a work of art. It's not a work of AP English literature sophistication points here on the poetry essay, but you do need to make sure that you are giving the reader enough substance there. And guys, one thing I want to say about the link that I'm going to pop right here in the chat for all of you. If you go to this link, this is the College Board site. Again, it's not the most up-to-date version of what you're going to see in 2021, but looky here, you can see actually some badly that's nice handwriting. Ooh, that will make a reader's heart sing. That's a
very happy.
If you write like this, no extra points for you, but that's a lot of love to the AP Human Geo graders.
But I do want to make a quick, I want to make a quick handwriting point here. One of the things that becomes a big challenge for the kids who have bad handwriting, sometimes if the reader's trying to like work through it like hieroglyphics, you might make it so hard for them to just read what you're writing that literally you're making it harder for them to find where you got the point, because they're not able to read it. It's almost like just you're trying to read in a foreign language. So always do your best. And I have kind of shaky handwriting, but I always know there's the handwriting I use when the person absolutely has to be able to read it. So I break out my special cleaner handwriting that all of us with bad handwriting have.
Yeah, just to get those points. If you're in your best handwriting behavior,
Yes.
not a problem for those digital test takers, not a problem.
True.
You're a fast typer and you're a terrible handwriter. That's one of the minor advantages on digital. But as we were saying all throughout the AP exam hack show here, clearly there are some distinct advantages for paper and pencil. Real quick, Jacob has asked, are there any specific study techniques? I want to show a couple things that are useful and give you some news and updates real quick. One thing that we have on our website, and I'll post this link here in the chat for all of you, are our study guides. Guys, by next week, we expect to have updated this. This is our Human Geography Study Guide pack. And this is amazing because actually Unit 5, which we've just gone over, has a lot of these key terms, a lot of these things that you want to be studying. I think we're adding Unit 6 and 7 very soon. So keep your eyes open for that. Another thing, Danny, you're going to be leading our student support course for human geography. Now, this is not like our free reviews here on YouTube and study guides. We can't make it free because we are offering a grading service. You actually send us your FRQs and your bad handwriting, and our graders will go through it and tell you what points you've earned, tell you what you did well, and how to improve. And that is going to be starting up in early April. You can access this in 8 different subjects, including for human geography. So definitely check that out. Last 2 questions I'll answer here real quick. Jacob's saying, can you lose points for referencing the wrong things on FRQs? Again, it's positive scoring only, right? You can only earn points.
You can only earn points. The one little thing to that is, sometimes you'll see students say, oh, well, it's this and it's that. You can't, hedge your bet. You can't be hot and cold. It's hot or cold. And you have to I always say, pretend like you're like a politician. You don't know anything, but you know the answer to everything. Say what you're saying with the utmost confidence.
Yeah, I think that's a great advice. One thing I'm going to do real quick, I've just answered a couple more questions that popped up. I want to thank you all for spending an hour, more than an hour with us here tonight. Thank you so much, Danny. Remember, he is at the Human Geo Guy on Instagram and TikTok. Follow him there. And Danny, I'm sure we'll be seeing you around the crazy AP season we're about to start. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And don't forget to subscribe.